Rainey? Eric?
Good evening, Commissioners.
There you are. Okay.
I'm going to share my screen here real quick and we'll get this started. So can you all see that?
Yep.
Good. So this is a work session follow-up from the prior work session we had on September 28th. And the intent being that we took the suggestions and comments and questions that were raised at the last meeting and made revisions to the draft text amendment codes. And basically, I'm here to report those changes. In your packet, there was a memorandum going into a little more detail about the specific changes. And really, all the comments that we received were incorporated to some degree in the current version of the draft code. So as of today, we've had 2 joint work sessions with both the Planning Commission and the City Council. And we've had 2 work sessions with just the Planning Commission. This would be the 3rd.
For a second, have we received any input from, your Canby, average Canby citizen at all?
Not that I'm aware of to date.
Okay.
Also, I will mention that as part of the public hearing process, we'll do our typical noticing requirements. And for each of these work sessions, I think we've given proper notice beyond. I'm not sure what else we could do beyond what is required. I mean, I suppose there could be broader outreach efforts, but I think it is important to mention that we've provided a pretty decent amount of opportunity to date for both the Planning Commission and City Council and the public to comment if they wanted to. I'm not sure why that is. If I guessed, I probably would be wrong. But moving forward from today, we will have the public hearing in our next meeting. And then from what you all decide as a commission, we'll have another opportunity at the City Council at the first reading of the proposed changes, and then also at the second reading.
Are you going to post something? I think it's called the Canby Connection. Used to be called Canby now. I don't follow it all that much, but until recently, when I've been locked down and have nothing better to do with my time. So, but that seems to be a pretty decent forum for folks. So I don't know if you're already doing that, but you might want to consider that.
We haven't so far, and if it makes sense, I'll definitely talk with Ryan about it, and
that's good.
And also the interim city administrator, because our new one hasn't started yet, with Joe Lindsay. Make sure that would work out and be okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, and I mean, we also have done the state noticing requirements. I feel like in terms of our noticing, we've done a pretty decent job, and this hasn't been rammed through, in my opinion. We've had a number of public opportunities for the public to engage, at least so far, by the letter of the law.
I would agree with you.
So,
yeah.
But I also agree that it's important to try and get people involved as early and often. So, so this is just a list of the changes that have been made since our last meeting. We included a definition of strand mounted, which real quick is basically an antenna that is mounted between two poles on a strand of wire. A real good example that you probably see, you may or may not notice, but at traffic lights, you'll see a little white kind of box, and those are used for emergency services to change the light to red or green. That would be pretty similar to what a strand mount in telecommunications would look like.
Okay.
We added and changed and beefed up the removal requirements. So what happens if an antenna and the equipment are no longer being used and have been abandoned, and what that means in the timeline for removal? Part of that was an inclusion of what happens when public infrastructure improvements occur. And so like if a subdivision were to go in and the adjacent right of way needed to be improved, and that required poles to be taken down or moved around, that the telecommunications company would be required to adjust to that as needed. Some of that came from the Portland Home Builders Association. They had indicated that this type of situation had arisen before in the Portland and surrounding area, where the telecommunications companies were not quick to respond on moving their equipment for needed public infrastructure improvements. Next item, we added some additional language about concealment of antennas. Some of that came directly from our last meeting and a meeting before, and basically trying to beef up the antenna concealment requirements so that they are as least visually impactful as possible. Another item directly from our discussions is the undergrounding requirement. So as it's written now, the applicant would need to underground any of their ancillary equipment as long as it's technically feasible. So I think, and that's in numerous sections of the code, but I think that was something we heard that the commissioners and the council were very much in favor of. So I think we've improved and strengthened that part, and it is consistent with most of the city of Canby in terms of how we deploy infrastructure in the right of way. We included, and this was something that Jeff Mills had mentioned in our last meeting, some requirements regarding noise. And basically the noise is measured on a decibel level. And I gathered some of this from the League of Oregon Cities, and then from the city of Eugene, and basically says that you can't increase the decibel, the equipment can't produce noise over a certain decibel level, and it's intended to not have this super loud humming equipment. Then we added some general restrictions about the placement of antennas and equipment. Some of them were related to placing them on the decorative street lights. So those would be off limits. Onto street furniture, landscaping, any kind of artwork or sculpture, or on any historic buildings of any significance. So that kind of intended to limit the placement of those types of antennas on that type of surroundings, I guess, in the public right of way. Then we reorganized the code a bit. and I think it reads cleaner and has a little more, I don't know, maybe logical sequence. And then some changes to the macro telecommunications facilities component, which came also directly from our meetings with you all as planning commission. We took out or moved around, I guess is a better word to say, some of the items that were not consistent with federal law, and made them consistent. Tried to organize it a little better as well. And then it's also important to note that staff didn't change a ton of what you see in the macro telecommunications facilities. I think there was some pretty good work there regarding acceptable and preferred sites. So basically, where would we want to see the large cell towers go? I don't think there's really a reason to change that. So that's kind of an overview of what has changed since our last meeting. And then our next steps will be to take any further direction from the Planning Commission for edits, and then prepare the formal text amendment process. We have a tentative meeting scheduled for October 25th to meet in front of you all. Obviously, ideally, it would be better if there were more planning commissioners here. I'm not sure if there was a confusion about timing, but
I think that was it, Eric. There, typically we start at 7, and this one started at 6. So I think that if I hadn't called Laney, I would be calling in at 7 for this. I think that there's some confusion around that. That's right.
Okay. And then ultimately the plan is to finalize this and then propose the text amendments via ordinance. And that's assuming we gain the planning commission's approval on the 25th of October. And that would be a first reading, second reading type process, and then a decision. So that's where we are at right now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. So that's where we're at right now. Feel like we have a pretty good product that balances the federal regulations, but also provides Canby with the opportunity to place some reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on the deployment of not just small cell telecommunications facilities, but all telecommunications facilities. I like that it's outside of, I like that the code now lives in its own section. I think that's always a good logical organization type procedure. Digging through other sections to find the telecommunications code, I don't think was ideal, but yeah, I think we have a pretty good product, and we will work to get it a little more tightened up before the next hearing. And that's basically what I have to share with you all today. If you would like to ask any questions of staff, or if you have further comments or recommendations, I'd be welcome to hear those now.
Well, I don't. Michael, do you have some thoughts?
Not particularly. It kind of looks like kind of distilled everything that we've talked about, and you know, as someone who's had to dig through other for like the electrical code, I sure do appreciate it when it's put together logically and in an easy to peruse format. So kudos there, definitely. I think this is a pretty good package.
I totally agree with that. I want to thank you all for putting in the time and the effort. And I know that it's tough sledding, particularly when you've got the federal government kind of driving the boat, and we're kind of protecting our own little turf here as best we can. So you did a great job, in my opinion. So yeah.
Thank you both. I just to reiterate, I think it's a good balance between the federal law, which is pretty restrictive, and it's getting more restrictive as time goes on, at least with telecommunications. And the plan now would be to visit with Ryan and Brianna and Lainey and do some more trim work or sanding, if you will, on the code and make sure it's all put together right. And then come back on the 25th to present that to you all.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. I don't have any comments to add at all. I think that was really excellent work. I had no questions. Michael?
I'm comfortable.
I am
Thank you.
too. So Eric, I think I don't know if it's just the three of us on the line, but if not, then we will. If you have if anything comes up that we need to know about, I'm sure Lainey will communicate that to us, and we'll go from there.
All right. Looks like
This is a short meeting.
I'm
Hallelujah.
seeing
There are
two.
two others that have joined,
Yeah.
Jason and Jeff. So you might want to see if they want to comment.
Yep. I
Hey,
will.
hey, sorry about that.
Yeah, this is Jeff. I want to apologize for not paying attention to Laney's announcements, but I'm here now.
No problem. Let me go back and so we just finished discussing, but I think that since you guys are here, I'll reiterate and bear with me, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Hutchison, if you wouldn't mind.
That's fine. You go right ahead.
I'm going to share my screen again real quick. So, okay. Good evening, Commissioner Mills and Commissioner Charles. I just wanted to give you guys the opportunity to see what's been discussed thus far. So if this sounds like rote, I apologize, but I'll go ahead and do this. So we have thus far, the Planning Commission has done 2 joint work sessions with the Planning Commission and City Council. And we've done 2 work sessions with the Planning Commission. And we've done several iterations of code revisions and changes. These are the meat and potatoes of what the changes look like since our last meeting on the 28th. And we did included a strand mounted definition. And I had mentioned previously that what a strand mount is basically an antenna that's on a wire in between 2 poles. And the way I've heard them described is that there's these small boxes, they're maybe this big, like 1 foot square. They're white usually, and they're for emergency services. You see them pretty frequently. You see them pretty frequently on intersections. Ambulances and fire trucks will have a button that they press that will change the signal from green to red or red to green. We also included some additional removal requirements, and that came from previous discussions with you all as the commission and as well as the city council. Additionally, and I had mentioned this earlier, is that the removal requirements also include some information and language about when a public infrastructure improvement occurs and what that would mean for a telecommunications company. So the example I used is that if a subdivision happened and there's right-of-way improvements required, that the telecommunications companies would be also required to move their equipment until the improvements are done, or to site them on a temporary type basis. That some of that language and direction came from the Portland Metro Area Home Builders Association. Apparently there's been issues with that in the past in Tualatin and I believe Wilsonville. We also beefed up some of the antenna concealment requirements. That is found in some of the application requirements, but also some of the standards. The intent there being that we're trying to reduce the visual impact of antennas to the greatest extent possible. Undergrounding was a big item that we discussed at the commission and at city council. At this point, the code basically would require undergrounding for ancillary equipment or accessory equipment, cabinets, switches, wires. Underground in all cases, unless it's technically not feasible. And when I say technically, I mean the equipment will not operate. And that's consistent generally with the way infrastructure goes into the right of way. So water, gas, power. We also included some noise limitations on new equipment, and that is on a decibel threshold. That's intended to not allow equipment that would generate like a loud buzzing or humming that would be audible beyond a certain decibel limit. The decibels in the code seemed to be pretty standard across a lot of jurisdictions that we looked at. We also included some general restrictions, and some of those are not placing antennas on the decorative street lamps, on right-of-way furniture, landscaping, flag poles, and any structures of historic significance. So trying to limit the chance that a company would want to place their equipment on something that would not only be very visually impactful, but might even detract from a historic structure, for example. Then there's also been a reorganization of the code to, I think we feel that it's flows better and is a little more logical. And then we tried to clarify the differences between macro and micro telecommunications facilities, and also move some of the requirements for certain types of macro telecommunications facilities so that it's consistent with federal law. Some of that is about co-locations. So a co-locate is when a telecommunications company places an antenna on an already existing pole. And the way the code read previously is that it required a permit that I don't believe we can ask for. And a lot of that is timeline basis. We also try to make it clear what's macro telecom and what's micro telecom. I think really the key benchmark for macro versus micro is when your tower or base structure is over 50 feet. That's really the biggest delineation line that I think exists between the two. So the antennas are going to land on both micro and macro sites, but the size of the tower or base station is really one of the key differences between micro and macro. So that's kind of a high level overview of the changes that have been made since our last meeting. Again, a lot of this came directly from you guys, from you all as a planning commission, and also city council. There's a bit more detail in the memo that was included in the packet. And then our next steps here will be to take some direction from you all as a commission. If you have any final comments, requests for edits or anything additional before we bring this back on the 25th to you all for a public hearing. And then ultimately, depending on what we find out from you as the planning commission on the 25th, we would move forward with finalized draft form of the text amendments, and then seek approval from the city council via ordinance on a first and second reading. So I think we've got most of the commission now so far, and I think everyone heard most of that, so that's good. That's it from me so far. I'd like to reopen the floor back to the commission for questions, comments, or any other opinions thus far. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you once again. So Commissioner Mills, do you have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a couple of edit requests, but I'd like to start off by thanking staff and Eric, I think in particular. This revised edit is, I feel, a significant improvement in organization and clarity. It reads well. Based on my limited ability to understand some of the things that are here, I still am convinced it's a great improvement. Particularly want to thank them for the macro versus micro divisions, the undergrounding, which I was pleased to see, and also the sound requirements. I was very, very happy to see those things. So overall, just a very positive comment about the work that's been done and the product that I had a chance to review. I did have 4 specific things to bring up that are very minor, and I'm going to bring them up quickly, Mr. Chair, and then give this back to the floor. Edits on page 11 of 24 on 1655-035. It's just a matter of formatting. That division number, most of the division numbers are 2-digit, dot 2-digit, dot 2-digit, and you put a leading 0 on 035 and again on page 24 on 045. And just for consistency, I think you ought to drop the lead 0. Another one is on page, the same page 11 of 24. There's a symbol in there that I wasn't too familiar with. I looked it up, and I think it's called the section signal, section symbol, and it's referring to codes. For example, under 1655-35A1A, there's a section, I believe it's section 1.1320. If I'm going too fast, I'll slow down. But my question to staff is, the section symbol is fine, but what code are you referring to? I presume you might be referring to FCC. And if that's the case, I'd like to see you specify that. Does that make sense?
That it does make sense, Commissioner Mills. And that is a federal section symbol. And I
Yeah.
think it does make sense to mention the where in the federal code it's coming from.
Yeah, keep in mind the limited understanding of your audience sometimes. Not all of us are as well versed in this as you are. So, yeah, if you could add an FCC or whatever the appropriate precursor is for that section, it would, just for if we have to, when we're reading this in the future, it'll help save a question or two. And then the final thing I have is on section 165550 on page 24. There's a bunch of divisions that are letter numbers that beginning at the bottom of the, I'm getting there now. That goes from number 3 to number, this is on page 25 on the big blue letters. You've got section 3, section 4, then we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I believe that A should be a different numerator. I think it should probably be, I'm going to guess and say an E. I think they're not indexed correctly. And I'll leave you to figure out if I'm right or wrong and if it needs to be changed, but that kind of jumped out at me as something's missing there, just in terms of how it's indexed and organized.
Thank you for those. That's super helpful. Sometimes when I'm looking at these code, it's obviously very helpful to have many different eyes, and I do see what you're saying.
But once again, I don't want this to detract from all the work that's been done. I've put together a lot of lengthy specifications in my life, and I'm used to chasing little details like this. It doesn't detract from the overall quality. So, Mr. Chair, that's all I have. Once again, my thanks to staff.
Thank you, Jeff. Jason, do you have any input at this point?
Yeah, once again, I really want to thank everybody who's put in the effort that they have here. And I understand the difficulty a little bit in something that's new like this. I mean, this is kind of new to all of us. It's not really something that even very many that I know of cities, I mean, obviously it's more and more all the time that are having to deal with this. But yeah, I mean, it's a relatively new thing for us to be looking at. And one of the things that I think would be really super helpful is that and this is something that I looked up some of this stuff, but it's hard to visualize for me what all of this is going to look like when you're looking down, a street, 2 blocks down a street or something, visually what that's going to start looking like. And we're spending a lot of time, of course, trying to figure out how to mitigate some of the intrusiveness of the site, that this will be detracting from our typical cityscape, I guess. And which is, I totally appreciate, and obviously this is a big reason that we have both the Planning Commission as well as the planners themselves in place. So because it's new, it is kind of nice to have a lot of this stuff put out in front of us so that we can kind of see what's going on. But one of the things that I feel like I'm lacking is just like some kind of visual. Eric, do you have a picture of something that you've placed in out there that shows kind of like looking down a street with these things to know what it is that we're actually starting to require versus what's already been out there that people are learning? Because you said, as before, in Wilsonville and some of these other Tualatin, some of these places, we're learning something from what they've done to maybe pull back a little bit and change it in some way, as you've listed in the beginning of this.
Yeah, and that's those are good comments, Commissioner Taylor. I think on one level, I've been hesitant to show pictures because for one, I'm not sure that's what it would ultimately look like.
Hmm.
So there's a phenomenon that happens where if someone sees these pictures of even what's an industry standard right now, that could be you, me, city council, or an average Canby citizen expects that's exactly what you're going to get.
Right.
That's why I've been a bit hesitant to show pictures and I have shown some in my PowerPoint, and I think I'm going to make a note now that it might be worthwhile in our next meeting, to show you guys what some of this is going to look like. And I can show you examples, but I think it's important, again, to bear in mind that might not be what it ultimately exactly looks like.
Well, it's like anything else, a fast changing technology, I'm sure.
Right. Generally, they do have a similar appearance. But if it's worthwhile, I think I could gather some images and have them in the next packet for you all to look at when you're reviewing the code, specifically around visual concealment.
Hmm.
I can tell you that the good visual concealment is pretty difficult to tell what it is. If you were driving down the street, driving down Ivy, for example, and there's good visual concealment with the poles, it'd be difficult to pull them out while you're driving and say there's a microcell tower right there. And that's the intent of the code. So that was a bit of a long-winded answer to say that I do agree that some visuals of what this will look like could be helpful, but I'm also have been hesitant thus far to not put examples out there, because I don't want that to be the expectation of exactly what could be deployed in Canby.
Which I'm really happy to hear that that's a concern, because one of the things that I'm looking at is obviously with the limited interaction that we have technically with the public at the current time still. And the only reason I say that is because although the meetings are open to the public and they can log on and get into this, it's really created an extra obstacle for there to be a lot of people really paying close attention to what's going on right now. And for that reason, I feel like whatever we do, whatever we come up with, whatever we decide or push forward, and if it starts happening, I think there's going to be particular pushback from the community that they feel like, hey, we weren't a part of this. And I mean, as open as we can make it, it still feels like it's somewhat closed, if you get what I mean. So I just didn't know if there was some responsibility on our part to try and close that limited interaction a little bit via some idea to elicit more response maybe from the community. And I don't know what that looks like. I'm just kind of throwing that out there because it just feels like it's something that would be important.
Thank you, Jason. Michael, do you have anything? Are you still with us, Michael? Michael.
I am.
Oh, okay. Do you have anything that you would like to add based upon the discussions we just had?
Not in particular. I think we've hammered out a lot of the issues, and I don't know. I'm, in the work that I do, I have been paying attention to it, but I'm really not sure. Thinking about what the attendance has been like for other planning commission sessions, I'm not sure what increased publicity is going to gain us. I think more likely we're willing to end up being put up with criticism no matter how often we try to communicate with the public. I think we will put up with criticism for not having done it enough after the fact.
I would agree with that. I've been following a train of a string of messages on social media on on Canby now. It's called Canby Connection now, I think it is. And people talking about the lack of communication between the planning commission, the planning department, developers, and the people. And I know the process. We all know the process that we all go through for a development, and the meetings and the hearings and the neighborhood meetings, things like that. And they don't see it until they see a D9 cat in their neighborhood tearing up some topsoil. So yeah, I think you're right on that. People don't pay attention until they see some equipment in their neighborhood. So
Yes, and with that being said, I still feel like somewhere in here there's got to be a way to bridge that gap. I mean, it is a responsibility, I believe, on our part to do so, and I know that we're never going to reach everybody, but
right.
but you know, I still feel like somewhere in all of this, it does feel like a really low turnout, whether before you know, we were doing the Zoom meetings or not. I still feel like maybe it's incumbent upon us to come up with some creative way, and I'll think on that. I was just throwing that out there, so but definitely I'll be thinking on this of some ideas.
Well, yeah, if you come up with something, I suggested before you came on, I suggested that we announce this in the Canby now. It's called Canby Connection I think, but one way or the other, social media can play a role in this. If we go down that road, I think that would be I don't know, beyond that, I don't know what else we can do, to tell you the truth. So having said all that, if there are no further questions or comments, I think there are just 4 of us here this evening.
Chair Savory, I'm here.
You're here. Wow. Welcome aboard. Do you have any questions or comments?
Well, first of all, I apologize. The meeting time completely threw me off. I was still working until quarter after. If we could set, I mean, last week I was getting on at 6:45, or last time 6:45. This time 6 kind of completely caught me off guard. If we could have a consistent meeting time, that might help the public be able to be involved. Because, you know, we've been at 7 o'clock for as long as I've been on the planning commission. And so I think that if there are people who are planning on showing up tonight, they may think it's at 7 o'clock also. I also think that this being a no bank and no post office day might have thrown people off as well. I don't think they assumed that the city would be having meetings today. I know I didn't. And that does not in any way, shape, or form reflect on staff. I know that you got the communications out there. I just didn't check personal email while I was working, so I didn't see that the link came out, and I overlooked the time on Friday. So I thought we were, 7, and I'm like, I didn't see a link, so I guess we're not meeting tonight. So that is my error. I do think that I could paraphrase Commissioner Taylor's comments, and I think he just volunteered to be a sign spinner before the meetings.
Now stop that.
I think that is that's the best idea we've had all night.
I think that he could have a big, and I think that Commissioner Hutchinson would agree with me, a big maybe sign that spins around that says, "Ask me about 5G at 7 p.m. tonight," something like that. I don't know. It's an option.
I wonder if they have costumes that would look like such.
I don't know, but I have an inflatable T-Rex costume you're welcome to borrow.
It gets attention, whatever gets attention, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think that we discussed pretty thoroughly last meeting about trying to get people more involved. I know with the delay in getting the recording out there, I don't know if the Canby Current podcast had a chance to do an article or write anything up, they're usually really good about that when it's broadcast the night of, but I don't know if this one, since it was weird and it was a little, timing was a little off. But back to the 5G, I completely understand where Eric is coming from with the photos of what it could look like. I know that with other things, people said, that's not what they said it was going to look like. I know that when the Dahlia building was built and it was covered in yellow, Tyvek paper or whatever that was, everybody was in a panic that we we're going to have a giant yellow Big Bird building downtown. So I think that that's part of it. Perhaps being able to put up something on the fairgrounds message board about meetings, about, planning commission. I think people know it's there. I know the social media posts that Chair Savory is talking about, I commented on that and said where they could find information, where they could look at the agendas, where they could review the packets, that it was all very out there. And a few people did, say thank you for that. But, I think it's until it's, again, in their backyard, they don't notice it. And I think that's how people are with most things. I think that just going on the record, the last two meetings saying, hey, we really want our community to be involved, I think is excellent that we've done that. But back on the pictures, I think if Eric does share some photos, that they should have big red letters across them that say example, not actual thing, because I know that after the, I think it was the Canby, when they were still the Canby Now podcast, posted pictures of the mock-up of the arch. People are upset about the banner that was on it because it said something about Wild Hares Festival. So people were upset that it was not something else. And they're like, it's just a mock-up. And people were still like, why is that going to always talk about that? And anyway. And then I think that the monopole, one of the jokes on that was somebody put up a picture of a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and people freaked out about that too. So I think having something in big red letters that says example, not actual, item or something, so that it's can't be misconstrued, would be great.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to tail on that, especially if we had a picture of something that's already been implemented in some city, and then we have a picture of what we might be putting up in Canby that might show that this is much better than what other cities have gotten. Maybe this would help put minds at ease.
This is Eric again. That's a good segue related to this. So one of the things that's required as part of the application for anything that's coming in is they're going to be required to do photo simulations. So wherever the project site is, they're going to have the existing and then a proposal. So we as staff, when we see these, we're going to see, before they're even placed there, a simulation of what it looks like right now versus what it's going to look like with it installed. And those, a picture is worth 1,000 words sometimes. And with those applications, we can look at it and see, is this meeting our visual concealment standards or not? Again, and I think Jennifer's right, and that's kind of what I was getting at, is I was hesitant to show you guys a ton of pictures because I didn't want the phenomenon of expectation that this is exactly what it'll look like. And I think what we'll do if we include pictures in our next presentation is that they will be, this is an example in bold lettering that it could look like this. Most of the deployments that I've seen in cities look fairly similar. I think the telecommunications companies are going to expect these requirements generally. this isn't new hat to them. And what they're looking to do is to move in with least resistance possible. And if that requires them to implement some visual concealment or shrouding, they are going to do it, because it for them, they're spending dollars every time they do back and forth with staff. And if they have the technology, they're used to doing it, the telecommunications company, and they'll generally comply. So with the visual discussion, I had that to add.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, John, this
yes.
is Larry.
Larry.
Yeah, I was late to the party, but I think I got the gist of it. I had just a couple of comments that kind of go along with what everybody else says. I'm concerned about the visual aspect of it. If there's some way that they can get some kind of aesthetic or some kind of concealment thing, that would be good. The other one is the noise. I was wondering about the decibel levels, because I know a lot of times the federal code for decibel levels or state code, it may not be loud, but there may be a constant humming out in your front yard. I'm concerned about that. And then the last question I had was really out of curiosity, and I don't know if Eric would know or not, but is any of this new technology that they're putting into cities and stuff resistant to an EMP? And that was all I had.
So I'll field the noise question first. The noise requirements were gathered from the city of Eugene and from the League of Oregon Cities. It's pretty standard, and what they're doing, what the requirements are, is that it can't increase the background decibel level over a 24-hour period by a certain amount. A lot of that might fall into the hands of code enforcement, but I think this is also, from what I've seen in other municipalities, is a pretty standard practice. And Commissioner Mills had mentioned this in one of our prior meetings. And so what we're looking for is that this installation of equipment doesn't increase the background decibel levels over a 24 period by a measurable amount. And I think that's a fair ask and not too much of an overreach. As far as EMP, I don't know. That's outside of my realm.
I
Hey,
have a question to follow up on that. Isn't the decibel part of it meeting the FCC requirements that we're not allowed to disallow if it meets whatever those requirements are? Or can we make ours tighter?
That's correct, Commissioner Trundy. They're not so restrictive that it would create a scenario where they would not be able to deploy their equipment. The other thing along those lines is that there is basically a built-in variance in this code where they can ask for a deviation from the standards. And one of the reasonings behind the deviation request is that they can't meet a certain technical specification. I don't expect that would be a common occurrence, but I think not only does it provide some flexibility, but it allows us to not get stuck into a code that is so intensely rigid that we end up getting legal challenges. And I don't think that's something the city of Canby is looking to or prepared to take on personally.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner Trundy?
Yes, I thought that it was a case where we don't necessarily have deference, or they don't allow us deference for things like that. And that's your question. Your response answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah, correct. We have no deference on federal law at all.
Okay, any more follow-up questions? So Eric, thank you so much for your time, and we will be following up at our next meeting, which is on I think is it the 25th?
No, it's the 26th.
26th. Okay,
At 7 p.m.?
yes.
Yes. And can I explain something about that?
Absolutely.
All work sessions are normally planned at 6 p.m. because they usually happen before a regular meeting. So we were
I
supposed
thought
to
that was
have,
just for city council. I didn't think that was for us.
no, we followed the same lines as they do. And we were supposed to have a meeting after this, but we had to push it out because it was for the TSP amendment, which we had to notify DLCD, give them their 35-day notice. So we had to drop that from this. So that's what happened. That's why there was confusion.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, wait a minute. I thought we were dropping the meeting, and then anyway.
Okay, well, all things come out in the wash, and all's well that ends well. So I think
But
any other, I'm giving everybody one last chance to speak their mind here before we sign off.
this is Lainey again.
Hi, Lane.
I have a problem. We kept telling the public in our notices that we put in the paper that we would have a duly noticed meeting. And if we have that meeting on the 26th, I don't know that it's duly noticed because we normally need 20 days to do a duly noticed meeting. Right, Eric?
That's right. I thought we had already noticed the public hearing.
No, we haven't.
We sent DLCD notice, correct?
Right.
If that's the case, then we need to accommodate the 20 days.
Because if we're going to send this out and like get it on Facebook and all of that kind of stuff, and in the newspaper, then we need to do that 20 days before the meeting, the official meeting.
Right. And I think, but we definitely don't want to create a procedural issue.
That too.
So I think it makes sense. We need to accommodate that, and we could do it for the next scheduled planning commission meeting.
So October 32nd.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be on October 9th. It would be on the same thing as the TSP amendment.
November 9th.
November 9th.
November 9th. I'm sorry, I said October.
Yeah, I think that's what we should do. Ideally we could have it the 25th or 6th, but it also would also give us a little bit more time to coordinate with as staff internally to get the product 100%. So I think that's what we should do.
And if you all need to double check all of your guidelines and calendars and everything and need to just notify us later of the change in it, I'm fine with that. If you go back and look at it and go, oh, we did send out the first notice, or this what we sent counted or something like that, I'm fine with that. I think the rest of the commission would be as well.
Yep, I would. So, any other, Madam Secretary, do you have any further problems that we need to solve for you?
I always send the notice for our meetings out 10 days before the meeting. That's
Yes.
the one that you get on that Friday.
Right.
So, and it's usually during the same week after we've had a meeting. So Watch for those emails. They're really important.
Yep.
Laney, this is Commissioner Boatwright. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
I won't be here the 9th. I'll be elk hunting, so.
I knew that.
So,
You're
all
gonna
right.
bring turkey for all of us, right?
You bet. If I got something, I will.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Eric. Thank you very much, Laney, Commissioner Boatwright, Trundy, Commissioner Mills, Mr. Hutchinson, and Jason. Thank you all for your input, and we'll be seeing you on the 26th. Is it? I can't remember. I'm sorry.
I think it's likely we will be visiting November 9th.
November 9th. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks,
Okay.
John.
Thank you all, and have a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
buddy.
Good night.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.